around their table or they're about networking with others. Let's hear it again for Perry and for George, his father. Wow, that was really emotional. I'm having a hard time speaking here myself. But our next presenter is a life coach. You may have heard her, Debbie Sluice.
I don't know how I'm going to follow this. Truly, your story also moved me. So, Steve, thank you for having me here. Steve and I'm trying to think how long we've known each other, many years. And one of the things, so I spent 30 years in childcare. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Here in Blenheim, growing together, and then there's one here in Chatham. And remember, Steve, I heard your story. I think you were a TEDx speaker. Is that right? Did you deliver this talk? I remember hearing you speak, and we were speaking afterwards around what I did, which is my expertise is vision boards. And you had said, that would probably have been something really useful when I was in recovery, to have had at the end of my bed something that I could focus on, of, like you talked about, the goals of, and getting that hope, like you said, you had where people were telling you it's not possible, but having something tangible for what is possible. So I'm just honored to be here. So before I begin, just by show of hands, let me ask you something. Do you ever get the sense that you're meant for something more? Raise your hand. About half of you, okay? And so not more to do, not more to prove, but more of who you were actually created to be. So let me take you back to a moment that changed everything for me. So I was leading a team of about 75 in my childcare organization. I was a director, and like I said, I'd been there for 30 years. And we had a committee that was called the Social Committee. And I was led by a board of directors, and I convinced my board of directors to put funding towards social events. Because what I know is when my employees were having fun, they were probably more likely to stay with the organization, to be happier with employment. And so I was more the bank in the meeting, just to organize the funds, whereas the employees were more the idea people. And we love our potlucks. Does anybody hear a good potluck? Right, yeah. And at work, it would be, everyone would have their thing. So for me, it was meatballs. I always brought meatballs. And so I was in the meeting, and I was going to say, I'll bring the meatballs. It was up here, but it wasn't coming out. And I'm like, well, that's weird. And I just kind of let that go. Then I went into my next meeting, and it was in one of the supervisor's offices, and we were in this small little room. There was the 3 supervisors, and I was speaking, and we were sharing about the challenges of work. And all of a sudden, their eyes got really big. And they're looking at me, and they're saying, Deb. I said, what? They said, your face. And half my face had fallen. I'd lost my speech, and half my face was frozen. And so I found out, and you would have thought at that point, so I think that's quite comical that you took the cab home, because I ended up calling my husband as well, slurring on the phone, and he's like, what is wrong with you? And I said, nothing, I'm fine, I just wanted to call you. And he said, go to the hospital, get an ambulance. But I didn't. You know what I did? I just went on with my day. And so I told myself I was fine, but I did find out later that I had a little mini stroke at work. Now mine was due to stress, for sure. And so when I was at the birth, so this is a month later, I was at the birth of my brand new grandson, who's now turning 7. And my daughter and I were in Chatham, and I was laying in the bed beside, and the baby was beside us. And she said, Mom, why are you still at your job? Because I had actually started Dare to Declare 2 years prior. And I said, because I'm really scared to become an entrepreneur. I was hanging on to that $60,000 I was making a year that I knew was coming every 2 weeks, that paycheck. And so she planted that seed. 2 weeks later, I was at a conference in Caesars Windsor, just down the road, and I heard the speaker ask these 2 questions. She said, what's the price you're paying for not following your dream? And I thought, ooh, it's actually pretty high. It's my health, but it also has to do with my baby grandson. I want to have freedom of time, freedom of money. But then she followed up with this question. She said, what's the price you're paying? What are those around you paying for you not following your dream? So that was the decision. That was the moment I made a decision. I was going to give my board of directors my notice and to step full-time into my career. So here's what I know to be true. You're literally one decision away from your best life. Not 10, not a checklist, not a big project, just one. One decision to believe that you are worthy. One decision to act before you're ready. One decision to stop scrolling, numbing, venting, people-pleasing, all the things we do to avoid. And you don't need a map. You simply need a made-up mind. So why don't we make that decision? Well, because the lies feel convincing. Playing small is safer. Comfort is easy. Growth, well, that takes courage. So someone that I follow, her name is Brené Brown. She has a whole TED Talk on vulnerability. Check it out, it's on TED Talk, it changed my life. She said, we can choose courage or we can choose comfort, but we can't have both at the same time. And today I want to invite you to think about this equation. Courage plus risk equals confidence. So, and when you have confidence, it gives you more courage to take bigger risks, to step into greater confidence. And so what happened when I gave that notice? Well, that was January 2020. Does anybody see the punchline? The world shut down 3 months later, right. So I decided to leave my full-time comfort job to step full-time into being an entrepreneur. I gave my board of directors 6 months notice. Now, I'm thinking, Steve, that it was at the same time when I heard you talk. I heard another woman deliver a talk about kindness. And I thought, if everybody could just simply be kind, that would be incredible. And I also thought about the idea of generosity. And I chose that year, my power word, my word for the year is generous. So January 2020, I chose my word as generous. So knowing I was gonna leave, gave my board of directors 6 months notice, I hired a coach, a business coach, and she said, well, Deb, maybe your vision board workshops could go online. And I'm like, I don't know, I've only ever done them in person. I don't think this is gonna work. It's like a physical board. People glue stuff on their board. Like, I don't know if that's actually gonna work. But I thought I'll give it a try. And one thing that I had known what was working for me as I was exiting 30 years, so I had cleaned up 3 offices, I had the health unit was asking, changing the regulations, it felt like every other week. My employees wanted to know who their new boss was gonna be, the families wanted to know when we were gonna reopen, and I would take a deep breath every time, and I would say, I am generous. And it would just help reset. Now all of us have like an internal thermostat. And you might have heard this idea of being fight or flight, like hot or cold, or freeze. Well, most of us, this woman who wrote a book, she says we're walking around with 8-year-old brains, most of society. We just fly off the handle, or we just stay in bed, or we get depressed, or we numb. But this word that I had was able to help me reset and get back to that comfortable internal temperature that I had set, so I could make great decisions and be fully present for my employees. And then I was able to actually exit. And so that workshop I did online, I had 65 people register. I created 10 paying clients from that. And then what I discovered was, wow, there's more to the world than Chatham, Kent. I just thought people were going to do vision boards here in my studio. My husband owned a building supply company. For those of you maybe familiar with Oldershaw Building Supplies, my husband owned that building supply company, and I had a studio on the 2nd floor there. And so people used to come to my studio. But now, because I was online, I suddenly had the world as my oyster. People from England, the United States, Ireland, and people were telling me, Deb, do you know that no one offers this workshop, this idea of vision boards like you do? I'm like, in the world? Here I am, just doing my thing, Chatham, Kent. They're like, yeah, you've got something really special. And so, if you've let me back up. Have you heard of the idea of the law of attraction? 1. Uh-oh. Okay, basically what it means is what you focus on, you get more of. Would you agree to that? Yeah. If you are associating with negative people, like Steve was talking about, and you let them get into the real estate in your brain, you're going to lower your vibration. It's going to lower your energy. But when you are with positive people, like you're doing here today, where you're hearing these beautiful, incredible, inspiring stories, you're going to be seeking more positive things and more positive people, and you're going to be inspired. So what Oprah says is if you get in life what you have the courage to ask for. So if you think about the universe like a coffee shop, especially like Starbucks. I remember when Starbucks first came in, I was like, I'm a Canadian girl. I remember going to North Carolina and getting into a Starbucks and being overwhelmed by all the choices. And I didn't even know, like, the sizes didn't even feel like they were in English. Like, I was like, what? I just want a medium double milk. But there were so many choices. And if you didn't put your order in, they'd probably just give you a black coffee with your name on it. So you've got to ask. And it's the same thing about getting clear. And that's what I help people do. Get clear on what they actually want for their life. So I launched my company, not because I thought vision boards were just cute, but because for decades I coached women and men in the same loop. I'm too busy, I'm not ready, what will people think? And I knew that loop because I lived it. And actually my first vision board wasn't actually a vision board at all. It was my own picture. So the photo up there was actually taken by a photographer in Windsor. Her name is Heike Delmore. She does branding photos. It's also on my business card. And my business card, I actually didn't have a business yet. I looked at that picture and I said, Heike, that girl's a rock star. She goes, well, it's you. I'm like, When I look in the mirror, I see a mom, a childcare director, a daughter, but that girl, she's gonna change the world. And so for the first time, I peeked into the future that is now my reality. I am a global coach. That was only 9 years ago. And so you can never outperform your own self-image. And so by having my first branding photo shoot, that certainly helped me. So I'm gonna give you a little bit of stats if you're thinking, Deb, this sounds really woo-woo. And it is. It is about energy, but there are stats around this. By simply writing down your goals, there's a study that was done in Dominican University in California that says you're 42% more likely for them to come to fruition simply by getting them out of your head and writing them down. I was talking to a woman today on a call, and she called it her bucket list. She goes, do you know, she said, I wanted to start a bakery. She goes, I found that list recently, and she said 3 out of the 5 things all came to fruition. She goes, and I wrote them down. And I said, well, studies show. And actually it goes up to 76% more likely when you share them with a trusted person. So what Steve has done here, he's done you a favor. You've got people now at your table who are positive. You've gathered these incredible people. You talk about incredible people in Chatham, I agree, but not all are. There are definitely some naysayers, but you've got some positive people here who want to make a difference in other people's lives. And so by sharing with trusted people, that percentage actually goes up to 76% more likely for your goals and your vision to manifest. Because what I know is that words become thoughts, which then become beliefs, which then inform our actions, which then inform our results. So if you want different results, you just literally change your words, how you speak, and how you allow other people to speak to you as well. I'm gonna give you another equation. So I'm certified as a Jack Canfield Success Principle trainer. Anybody know Chicken Soup for the Soul? Yeah, I think almost everybody had one of those books. So Jack Canfield was a co-author for Chicken Soup for the Soul, but he also wrote the Success Principles. And he has this equation, E plus R equals O. Now E stands for the event. O stands for the outcome. Most people in society are only walking around with those 2 letters. This event happened, so this must be my outcome. Now these 2 men here already proved, that's not okay with me. This event happened, this is not gonna be my outcome. Steve said that. He goes, you're gonna tell me that I can't do it? You're wrong. Why? Because Steve had a superpower, his R, which is his response. And he decided to say, no, I'm gonna respond, and I'm gonna respond in this way. I'm gonna be the 1%. I'm gonna be the person that practices every day. I'm gonna get better. Because I have a vision, and this is unacceptable. So the event still does inform our outcome. There's no denying that. But it doesn't have to be the only thing that informs our outcome. It's who we choose to be, and both these men are examples of that. So our response. So I haven't had what these men have by any stretch of imagination, but I do have challenges. Could be relationship, could be health, could be job, it could be different stresses, and we all do every day. So choosing one word as a way to help you reset will really support you as well for that outcome. So right now you stand at crossroads. This can be another inspirational moment. You're like, okay, forget about this tomorrow. Or you can decide to make a decision. Because here's the truth. You don't rise to your goals, you rise to your identity. Who are you? And, I was talking to a woman and she said, I'm retired. I'm like, I'm retired too. And my friends would argue that. But I'm like, no, this is what retirement looks like for me. I worked for 30 plus years in childcare. I'm having a blast. But this is who I get to be. I get to be the girl that I saw 9 years ago in those branding photos. The one who gets to make an impact in the world. The one who gets to travel and work everywhere. Your destiny changed the moment you decide to. So we spend so much time reacting, surviving, performing, but what if your next move wasn't striving, what it was aligning? So here's your invitation for this coming, for the rest of this week. Identify one area where maybe you've been playing small. Declare one bold action that you're gonna take this week. Maybe it's reaching out to someone, maybe it's taking better care of your health. Write it, say it, activate it. Because when you decide, everything changes. So in closing, my life today is full of joy, vision, and expansion, but that didn't happen because I avoided pain. It happened because I let God use it. What was meant to break me, and what I didn't share some other things that have happened in my life in terms of childhood trauma and sexual abuse and so forth. But those things have become the very thing that has built me. And maybe that's true for you too, because here's what I know. You don't become who you're meant to be by accident. You become them by decision. And that decision, it changes everything. When you decide to rise, you give others permission to rise with you. So this isn't just about dreaming bigger, this is about becoming the person who lives it. Clear, confident, no longer waiting for that permission. Because you were never meant to play small. You were meant to declare. And you are one decision away from your best life. The moment that you decide, everything begins to move. And I believe it, I've lived it, and I see it in all of you. And I just want to thank you for your time.